On this episode of The Career Musician, we have Russ Kunkel, a self-taught drummer and producer who has worked with many popular artists, including Jackson Browne, Jimmy Buffett, Rita Coolidge, Neil Diamond, Bob Dylan, Glenn Frey, Art Garfunkel, Carole King, Lyle Lovett, Reba McEntire, Stevie Nicks, Linda Ronstadt, Bob Seger, Carly Simon, Stephen Stills, James Taylor, Joe Walsh, Steve Winwood, Neil Young, Warren Zevon, and let's not forget, he was the studio and touring drummer for Crosby and Nash. Okay, as if that weren't enough, Russell Kunkel and his bandmates, career musicians to the stars, guitar trio Danny Korchmar, Waddy Wachtel, and Steve Postel, along with famed bassist Leland Sklar, these cats formed a brand new band called The Immediate Family, and let me tell you, they are kicking ass. Now, we've already had Waddy Wachtel, Danny Korchmar, and Steve Postel. Now, with Russ Kunkel, we have almost the whole band right here on the Career Musician Podcast. Welcome, Russ Kunkel, to the Career Musician Podcast. I am super thrilled to have you here.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Man, all right. So I just have to say, just looking at the history, the credits, Jackson Browne, Bob Dylan, Buffett, Fogelberg, Glenn Frey, Carole King, the list, it doesn't stop. Linda Ronstadt, Bob Seger, Carly Simon, Joe Walsh, Neil Young. Bro, it's like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and B.B. King. Wow. Like, talk about an illustrious career. So that's the first thing I want to say. I'm enamored. Secondly, I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a studio musician. And it's people like you that I looked up to. Like I said, you and all the guys in the Immediate Family. So just talk about how it all got started, if you don't mind.
Well, which part? The Immediate Family or an illustrious career?
I think the illustrious career. One of the first things I like to discuss is, when did the music bug bite you?
Well, it started in a few different ways. Living in Long Beach, California, and it was the summer of my 11th grade in high school, and my mom said, this summer you have to get a job, to kind of help pay the bills and stuff. So I got a job at a Signal gas station close to our house, and having that job for 3 months pretty much cemented in my mind that that's not the kind of work I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I had already been in a couple bands, then we played on the weekends down in Long Beach at different dances and things. So I decided to throw my efforts full time into music because, being a grease monkey wasn't going to make it for me. But now I have a classic car and I love working on it because it's a passion, not something that I have to do. So that's when the music bug first bit me. It was a little bit of, kind of being pushed in the right direction. But my older brother before that was a drummer, and Gilbert, and he had a band that rehearsed in our house a lot. So I got to be around music at an early age. He introduced me to the drums and got me started. But the biggest break that I had as a musician was actually working on the James Taylor Sweet Baby James album. Peter Asher hired me to play on that album. He came and watched me at a rehearsal. I was playing at the time with a wonderful Americana folk artist named John Stewart. And Peter came, and Peter, who eventually produced the John Stewart album later, but he came and saw a rehearsal that I was doing with John and hired me on the spot to play on the Sweet Baby James album. And I have to say that everything kind of was the domino effect after that. My association with James and then Carole and Danny and Peter just kind of parlayed into lots and lots and lots of other great opportunities for me. So one was in the right place at the right time. I met some very influential people along the way, and I did the best I could to get rehired again.
Well, that's a magical phrase. I did the best I can to get rehired again. When you found yourself in that position, it seemed, from what you just described, it seemed very natural. Like it just kind of happened. Was that in fact the experience, or did it take some digging to get in the right circles, quote unquote?
I was in the right place at the right time. And so the circles were all around me. But as far as my attitude towards getting hired again, that you're talking about, late 60s, early 70s. And a studio musician was hired to play music for someone else's project, a singer-songwriter or a band or a publishing demo or whatever you were doing. So you weren't doing it for yourself. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I mean, my creed for being successful at being a studio musician was very simple. You find out what's needed and wanted, and you produce or present it. And that's true with anything if you want to be successful at something. So, and you have to remember that it's not your music, it's not your song. You're being asked to come in and assist, and that's what a studio musician does: is assist in the process, what's going on, and you try to. It's kind of like the doctor's creed: do no harm.
Ah, that's right.
And now, and you just made me think of something that I haven't thought of before, and I'll try to articulate it. In this day and age, a lot of young musicians aren't playing on sessions, and they aren't playing music with other people. They're playing music for their YouTube channel. And they're doing exactly what they want, and they're showing off all of their singular chops and the things that they learned how to do that get them off. And if you go too far down that road and you don't play with other people, and you don't start to understand what it's like to be a part of something as opposed to being the only part, you're going to fall behind because no one's going to want to play with you.
Wow, that you articulated that perfectly. Well said. I couldn't agree more. I think that any project is as good as the sum of all of its parts, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what you're talking about. And I have to say, I hate to sound like an old jaded guy. Oh, I miss the old days, but I do in so many ways because of that very reason. You know, like you said, I mean, Sweet Baby James, you're talking about history. You're talking about musical, cultural, artistic history that was encapsulated in sessions like that. Yeah. And I'm afraid that perhaps we don't have as much of those experiences anymore.
Well, not as many, because, like I said, there are people. Once everyone realized that if they had started a YouTube channel and they could become a star just by themselves, doing whatever, telling jokes, playing an instrument, whatever. It's a wonderful venue for exposure. It really, really is. But as far as musicians go, music is about playing with other people. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, the best experience of music is by playing with other people. That's when you really get a tremendous amount of enjoyment out of it. Now, I'm not saying you can't get enjoyment out of sitting down in your room and playing an acoustic guitar beautifully, like Steve Postel does.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to balance it out. You have to be able to play with people. I remember I read somewhere that Dave Grohl was doing an interview, and someone asked him, what's your best advice for somebody that wants to break into the music business? And he said, find like-minded people that play different instruments, get in a garage and play until your fingers bleed.
That's it. That's the best. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Wow. Okay. This is great. So how did you go from knowing that all right, I don't want to work on cars for a living, I want to go and get gigs? So what were some of the early gigs, perhaps? Did you have any of those, like those prom gigs or, backyard parties? And how did you get, really cut your teeth in the gigging scene? Well,
the gigs that I played down in Long Beach that were, during that period of time, they didn't pay very much. And, we were hungry for anything. We'd play at the Elks Club. We'd play for car clubs. We'd play at the high schools. We'd play for, weddings. We'd play for anything. And at that time, there was a few clubs. There was a club up in LA called the Cheetah. There was there were some clubs down in Long Beach that we played that, had us back a few times. And, but those were, we were just, 18, 19 years old. So we were just, we were falling all over ourselves to get to the next gig, just hungry to continue to do it.
So from the
member of it.
Right. Well, from those late teen years to the early 20s, and then finally hooking up with Peter Asher through, like you said, the Jon Stewart gig, and having Peter put you on with, the James Taylor record. What was that transition like? At what point in your career did that all happen? Was it shortly thereafter, or did it?
Very, very shortly thereafter. I mean, I came to LA with a band called Things to Come, my band from Long Beach, and we had a manager from up in Hollywood, and he brought us up and got us a gig playing the Whiskey A Go Go for 19 weeks in a row, opening up for everybody. So I got a lot of exposure in the LA music scene, and that was in 1998. So, 1968.
1960. Okay.
That was in 1968. So there was a lot going on in Southern California in 1968.
Wow. And
it was an amazing time to be on the Sunset Strip and experiencing all of that. So I met a lot of great people, and the band broke up, and I started doing music publishing demos for a man named Joel Sill at ABC Dunhill Music. And during those sessions, I met people like Joe Osborne and Larry Knechtel and Al Casey and Tommy Tedesco. I met a lot of great studio musicians, and I kind of broke into the studio scene from that. Starting to do some small sessions. But truly, meeting Peter Asher and playing with James and Carole, and from Sweet Baby James and Tapestry and Blue, all of Joni Mitchell's Blue, all of those albums I played on, all happened in 1970. Wow. So the trajectory from those recordings and from that stuff for me kind of carried me well into the 80s by touring with James, touring with Carole, touring with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, touring with Jackson Browne, recording with all of them. So one thing just led to another. But it really started by playing on the Sweet Baby James album and having Peter Asher as a friend. I can't stress enough on how important that friendship was, not just for me, but for Danny, for Leland, for all of us, Waddy too. So.
I always talk about the R word, relationships, right? Like we have to remember that so oftentimes the work does come from relationships, that especially the ones that are well cultivated, and now it's become such a buzzword. Oh, what about networking and this and that? I shouldn't feel like networking. It should just feel like natural life, just letting those relationships happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, okay, you just said a couple things that I have to pinpoint here. Joni Mitchell Blue, Carole King Tapestry, Sweet Baby James, James Taylor, all happened in 1970. That's an amazing credit to add to your list. You and all the guys, like you just mentioned, Waddy and Steve Postel and Danny Korchmar and everybody else in that era. It's just so much, there was so much musical history. In 1970, as a late teen or early 20-something, did you realize that what you were working on at the time would grow to be such iconic pieces of work?
No, hindsight is definitely 20/20.
Yeah.
While we were, and I've been asked this question a lot, while we were making those albums, we were just making them, happy to do it and very excited to be working. And quite honestly, every time I left the studio, I just wanted to make sure that I'd get hired back again. I was more concerned about that than thinking about whether something was going to be a hit or not. Mm-hmm. But looking back on it, if those are the only 3 albums that I ever played on, my career was a success.
That's right. Yeah.
And everybody else has their own. Waddy has his set of albums and projects that he worked on that are a little bit different from mine. Danny's are a little bit different from mine. Leland's are a little bit different. But for me, those three albums for me are just realizing that I actually did play on all of them and it wasn't a dream is like a Christmas present every moment.
Pretty darn cool, man. I remember talking to the other cats in the immediate family, and they were telling me about tracking live, and how that was a big thing. Especially, I love tracking live. I've had the pleasure of doing several sessions tracking live over the years. Not as many anymore, but there's a magic that happens, right? It's magical. So you're going into these iconic studios, even though you don't realize it at the time. You're set up. There's some cool rugs on the floor, some cool lighting and candles, I'm imagining, and you start to vibe out, right? Is that kind of like the deal?
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to quote Danny Korchmar. He has a saying that he likes to use. He said, "There's no plug-in that you can use that'll replicate 4 or 5 people in a room playing music together.
That's right. That's right.
So,
And it sounds like absolutely. It sounds like Peter Asher really understood that concept as well. Of course, many producers, especially back then, really got that. Like Quincy always says, the job of a producer is making the right phone calls, right? Knowing who to call.
Well, sometimes, and not knowing when to say stop.
That's right.
Knowing when you have it, and not overdoing something.
That's right.
But, I mean, that would be an interesting podcast for you to do, is just to talk to all the producers that are still around from that time, the Peter Ashers, the Lou Adlers. I mean, there's so many of them that are gone now. Right. I mean, Jimmy Iovine made amazing records. I mean, I worked on Belladonna with Jimmy Iovine before he, became, the gigantic music mogul that he rose to be.
Yeah.
And Jimmy's a great producer. Absolutely fantastic producer.
That's so funny that people even forget about that, because, like you said, he's more of a business mogul now. And I know a little bit about Jimmy just listening to his interviews or reading about his Bruce Springsteen days, how he got started. Right? So that's pretty incredible that you get to work with him as well.
Well, yeah, Jimmy Iovine, Richard Perry, Peter Asher, Quincy Jones, Arif Mardin, during that period of time, there were producers and labels that nurtured artists.
Right.
When they hired Aretha Franklin, when Ahmet, signed Aretha Franklin, he didn't expect her first album to be a smash hit. It was fine. Wait for the second or third one. Nowadays, a label sign an artist, it's like a flag. They run it up a flagpole to see who salutes it.
That's right.
And if no one does, well, then we're on to the next flag.
And we move on. That's right. They are so quick to dismiss it and just literally put it on the shelf. They need somebody else's validation, it seems like you said. They have to run it up the flagpole. That just seems so such the opposite of what it should be.
Well, it wasn't like that before. We live in a world of immediate gratification now, on all fronts, all levels, all genres. Everybody wants everything now.
Right. So true. Yeah. Man. Okay, so as your career goes on, the credits just continue to pile up. Jackson Browne, Jimmy Buffett, Harry Chapin, Rita Coolidge, Neil Diamond, again, Bob Dylan. As your resume is building, at what point do you realize, okay, wait a minute, I am one of the cats. I'm doing the shit. I'm doing the big shit. You know what I mean? You had to have a moment, an aha moment where you're like, okay, I'm kind of doing some cool stuff here, right?
I would have to say that if I've had that moment, it's been closer to the present day than it was way back then.
Okay.
Like I said, I was more concerned about, feeding my family, staying healthy, making sure that I could do, the next tour that would come up, was looking forward, looking 2 or 3 steps ahead, to make sure that, things would happen in a timely fashion. But like I said, I'm incredibly humbled by the great artists that I've had a chance to work with and their music that I've had to make over the years. And there's so many of the cats. I'm just one of them. So
I like that. And managing a career for ourselves as career musicians is quite the task, isn't it?
It is, and it takes a village. It takes support of a family and a wife and friends, and it's a group effort. Not, no one person can do it themselves.
At any point in your career, have you ever outsourced some of the managerial tasks? Speaking of the village, have you ever had a manager or somebody like that,
I have, and the immediate family has a great management team right now, probably the best one that I've ever been involved with. Fred Crochelle and David Halfont.
Nice.
But I've had personal managers in the past, and they've been good. But a manager can only do as much as you're willing to do before him. In other words, if you promote yourself and you're out there doing good work, then they can get you gigs. they can't necessarily get a gig for you out of thin air unless you're already out there promoting yourself anyway. So
right, doing the hustle, grinding. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's really awesome that you mentioned family, because I always respect the people that can balance family life with our, especially peculiar lifestyles in music, right? So talk about that. That's quite a balance. And like you say, doing the tours and whatnot and still maintaining family life.
Well, I spent most of my life on the road. When I wasn't on the road, I was in the studio, and I paid the price for that in certain relationships. Mm-hmm. Some with former wives, some with my children. But in the most part, for the most part, it's all worked out to be good, in the end. But if I had it to do over again, I probably wouldn't go on the road as much as I did. I've learned now that there's a price you pay for that. There's a price you pay for not being around. And so my advice to young musicians is, like, if your plan is to go out and work as much as you can, stay single.
Right.
Go out and just do it. And so there are other people not depending upon you for your presence to be around. But for me, it was different. And, now I realize, in the relationship I'm in now with my wife, Shauna, that, she is such a big support part of my career, just by encouraging me to do the things I need to do, but also reminding me when there needs to be balance. Right. In my day-to-day of, like, okay, well, you've worked on that enough. Now let's go for a walk on the beach.
That's good.
Hi, this is Russ Kunkel, and I'm a career musician.
Blasting the stereotype of musicians. Follow us at the Career Musician Podcast.
Download, subscribe, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast platforms.
I have to again agree and talk about Lola, who you met last week. She's my balance for that, and it is an amazing blessing to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So something else. Again, I was once in a similar position. I was on the road quite a bit. I don't think as much as perhaps you were. I was the music director for Kenny Babyface Edmonds, for a long time.
Huge fan of his.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Myself included. I was with him for about 12 years. We didn't do big tours like he used to back in the day, but we, the weekend warrior type stuff, a lot of fly dates and things like that. Occasional couple weeks in Japan or Europe. So I can totally relate to that. But again, it is an interesting dichotomy because we have to figure out a way to survive, right? So, and when you do have those jobs and they say, look, you can make X amount of dollars in 3 months, then you're like, oh, wow, maybe I should go do that, Yeah,
so, you have to take them. But it's always good to make those decisions with your family.
Absolutely.
So that, and there's always got to be a give and take, you can't just always get, you got to give.
That's right. I love that. And hey, speaking of the touring versus the studio work, I know when I first moved to LA in 2005, I sought the advice of a couple friends. I had a couple tour opportunities, and I said, if I go out and take this tour, I'm going to be missing that potential studio work. And I know I lived in Nashville for a long time. In Nashville, you were either one or two things, a road dog or a studio cat. But you could never be both, right? Now that's changed, obviously. Was that stigma the same way out here? If you did go on the road and you got those studio calls and you couldn't make it, was it detrimental to your studio career when you came back?
Well, fortunately for us, it wasn't detrimental because, we would go in the studio and cut an album with James Taylor, and then when it was released, we'd go on tour with him. Uh-huh. Or we'd cut an album with Linda Ronstadt. When it was released, we'd go on tour with her. Cut an album with Jackson Browne. When it was released, we'd go on tour with him. So, right. And at one point, I remember that Jackson's management and Peter Asher, they were talking to each other to find out how they should book their tours, so that all the same musicians could be on the tours. Right. They would book it sometimes. But I remember one year where I toured with all three. I toured with Linda, with Jackson, and with James in 1 year. Wow. And so it was all coordinated. So for us, it was different. I don't think we suffered. And when we came back into town and we were around for a while, not going on the road, there was plenty of work around to do. But there's not as much studio work now.
Right.
There's work for film and TV. You know, a lot of that is farmed out to, I'm sure, people like yourself who are also composers who do it all in house because they offer you peanuts now to do a television show. You know, and if you won't do what they want, they'll just use temp music.
They use temp music at the production libraries, which are
and which is everybody. That's another thing composers have done. They've created production libraries of all the cues that they made, and they get royalties on it, which is fine. But you know, the days of a lot of sessions. I mean, I remember doing a session at 10, 1, and 4. You know, I do 3 sessions a day and have to have 3 different drum kits and a cartage company. But those days are gone. Not for everybody. There's musicians in town that do the same thing, but they're hopping from film date to film date, and the scale is different.
Right. So. I have a huge grin on my face because, again, by the time I was 15. I knew that's what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to be one of those studio guys that you're talking about. And everybody would say a 10, 1, or 4. Or in Nashville, it was a 10, 2, and a 6. You know,
right.
3 sessions a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week on Saturdays, and the overscale and all that. That must have been really cool. And you have to have the different rigs, and you had your cartage company bring the different rigs to the different studios. I mean, talk about that. That had to be fun. At least in the beginning, until maybe you got burnt out, or tell us your experience.
Well, the best part about all of that was having the experience of playing all that different music.
Yes,
with like 3 different artists, 3 different projects in one day. I mean, you can't buy that kind of college. That's right. It was an amazing experience to be exposed to all of that different music and all those different players, different engineers, different studios, different producers. And that's how we networked back then.
Yeah.
And I would go into those dates wanting to be called back.
Yeah.
Doing everything I could to make sure that it wasn't about me. It was about making sure that they liked what I did and they liked how I integrated with the people and communicated, and hopefully they would hire me back. And for the most part, they did.
That's amazing. You mentioned one of my all-time guitar heroes, Tommy Tedesco. You said you worked with him, and I bought a video of his back in the 90s, and he was teaching a course, and he said, look, when you get behind the glass and the producer or the composer asks you if you can do something, the answer is always yes, period. I don't care if they ask you to play standing on your head with your hands tied behind. Yes, I can do that. Give me 30 seconds. I'll find the right instrument and I'll be right there. And I love that. I love that kind of challenge, and I love that kind of attitude, that mindset.
Well, what you just said reminds me of a story that Leland tells, which Leland was doing a session with Tommy, and the producer, like you said, asked him to play mandolin.
Right.
And Tommy said, sure, no problem. And he reached down behind the gobo, like no one could see what he was doing. And he got back up and he started playing, and the producer goes, perfect. And then a little bit later on, the producer said, do you have, another inch, a 12-string, something, whatever. And he says, yeah, no problem. He bends down like he's picking something up, and he plays, and the producer goes, great. And Leland said he sat up and he looked over, and all Tommy had was one acoustic guitar. And so what he was doing is he was just changing his positions in his fingerings to make it sound like what the producer wanted. So that's a perfect example of what your story, where the answer is always yes.
Yes.
Even if you don't have it, the answer is yes.
I love it. Oh, man, that's awesome. Have you experienced that in the drumming world when you're behind the glass? Have you been challenged in ways where you're like, oh, shoot, let me think quick on my toes here?
Well, sometimes about playing certain things, that is kind of needed and wanted. And if it's not in your wheelhouse, that's uncomfortable. You got to stretch for a little bit to do that. And reading as well. I read okay, but I'm not a great sight reader. Right. So sometimes I like to, if I know I'm going to have to be reading, I try to get into the studio early and be able to look at the charts and kind of scope out where the tough bits might be, But I remember working with Jimmy Iovine, actually, and he used a a great engineer named Shelley Yakis, who engineered all the Bob Seger records and the Stevie Nicks records. And Shelley had this thing of, and not to his detriment, but it was difficult on drummers. He would work on a snare drum sound abnormally long. And like I'm hitting the snare drum, whack, whack, ba 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 ba, whack, whack, whack. And after about doing that for about 10 minutes, Shelley goes, Russ, could you tune that snare drum up a little bit? It sounds like it's getting a little flat. And I said, yeah, it's getting flat. I've been hitting it for 10 minutes. It's kind of like, you don't understand, right?
Right.
Let's get a sound that's good, and then we'll be okay. So.
Move on, yeah. It's funny because I think there is a unique, how do you say, like personality difference between musicians and engineers, especially in those scenarios where the musicians are used to going in and cutting or tracking as a group, and we're used to having two engineers behind the board, a main engineer and an assistant. And isn't it funny how oftentimes we can get impatient? We're like, all right, come on, let's go, let's cut, let's do it. All right, okay, cool. Did you get it? All right, great. All right, let's move on. What's next? You've obviously experienced that.
Well, for sure. And there's always issues with electronics, and more times from the studio side than on the playing side.
That's right.
Just for some reason something's out of phase, or a microphone cable is not working, and you got to troubleshoot stuff.
That's right.
And there's a chain, there's an electronic chain that happens from a microphone to a speaker. There's a lot of places where it can go wrong. And, that's unfortunate in the studio because it slows down the process. If you're right on the verge of cutting a good take and then something goes wrong, it's not so good. But you work around it.
Especially if it's a good band take, right? You have 5 or 6 people and we all get a good take, and something happened where maybe, it didn't get recorded, God forbid. Oh,
yeah, those aren't so fun.
Yeah, exactly.
We all had them.
Man, absolutely. All right, so I have to ask you this, and this will be the only starstruck, quote unquote, question I ask. And I don't know if this is a myth or not, but maybe you can shed some light on it. The old Bob Dylan story that has been going around the business for years, about when Bob said, what do you want to make, to his musicians? And one musician said, oh, I want to make this. And the other musician said, oh, I want to make this. And then they both got what they requested. And then when they were talking later on, one musician got a lot more money than the other one. Have you ever heard something like that?
Never.
Okay.
I mean, I worked with Bob in the studio.
Okay.
Recorded with him, and it was a brilliant experience, and he was wonderful. And I didn't even care if I was paid at all. I was working with Bob Dylan.
How was that? That must have been surreal.
It was amazing. The first time I got to work with him, I was in New York with Peter Asher on another project, and Peter called me and said, put your drums in a cab and get over to CBS Studios. And I said, why? Are we cutting more tracks? He said, no, you're going to play with George Harrison and Bob Dylan. They're in town and they want to jam and they need a drummer. So I did that session, and, pinching myself the whole time. And then because of that, Bob Johnson was the producer on that night in New York, and he called me back to play on the New Morning album. So
wow,
that was an example of doing one thing good and getting rewarded by being called back to do another.
That leads to another. Man, I miss those days. That it seems like that used to happen a lot, especially when I was in Nashville, because we were still tracking quite a bit, in a live setting. There's so much to be said about that. Like you said, that's why your opening statement, when you do everything to try to get called back, there's so much weight in that. And I think there's a reverence that we all have earlier on for other musicians and producers and the people that have come before us.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely miss that. Obviously, you can tell I'm a little geeked out by talking to you and your colleagues because I'm such a huge fan. So,
Thank you for having me, Noah.
Man, I love it. So let me ask you this. First of all, what's the day in the life like of Russ Kunkel now? So what, like you said, the scene is different. What's your daily look like?
Well, now it's different because of COVID.
Oh, of course.
There's a similarity in our lives, in all of our lives, because of it. We're kind of in prison. We can't travel the way we want to travel. It's very difficult. But my day is pretty much the same. We're doing a lot of stuff with the immediate family. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility on all of us. We're making our own videos. We shoot our own video footage for songs that we release. And we send them to our the guy who edits them and puts them together. So we've all had to become, cameramen and soundmen and find ways to do all kinds of recording at home and so on and so forth. So, but a day in the life for me is, getting up, spending a good part of the morning with my wife and our dog Lily, and having a nice lunch, and then running some errands, and then at some point during the afternoon, get back in the house. I have a little practice kit set up, in the house. So that I always try to play a little bit every day. Nice. And work on some songwriting, and just taking it a moment at a time. That's how I spend my days. Just being thankful that I have 1 minute after the next.
Amen to that, man. I couldn't agree more. And I was going to bring that up. Thank you. The immediate family. I love the band. I love the videos. I love how you guys are all recording your separate, shots at home. And then, like you said, you have them edited together. Beautiful stuff. Talk about that. So immediate family, you guys just released an album towards the end of 2020.
We haven't released an album yet. We've released an EP.
EP. Gotcha.
Right. Which was 5 songs.
Right.
And we're just about to release another one. We had 2 singles off of that, Cruel Twist and Slippin' and Slidin'. We made videos for both of those. We just finished mastering the second EP. The single will drop, I guess, March something, coming right up. And then the EP right after that. So we have 2 focus tracks on that EP. And then in September, when just before COVID started, at the end of 2019, we have a full album of unreleased material in the can, that's going to come out in September. We're very excited about that, along with the documentary that Denny Tedesco, Tommy's son, has made. Denny, who made the Wrecking Crew documentary, has almost finished with our documentary, and that's going to coincide coming out towards the end of this year or the beginning of 2022. And then sometime probably April or March or April this year, we're going to go into the studio. April or May, we're going to go into the studio, cut a new album. We have a whole new batch of material to come out next year. So it's going to be bang, bang, bang for us.
I love that, man. I love that. Now, speaking of the Wrecking Crew and the film, like you were talking about, my good friend Jack Pyatt was involved with that, and Jack as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So
he's part of Jam Card, or
yes, he's with Jam Card, and he connected me with Lisa Roy, your publicist,
right?
And that's how we're all meeting here. So again, shout out to Jack, and thank you for that, and big shout out to the Tedesco family. Speaking of the Wrecking Crew, I want to talk about the section, which was also dubbed. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys were dubbed the Mellow Mafia.
Yeah, by some idiot. Yeah.
Okay. But just like the Wrecking Crew, we had the section, and again, all you guys were part of that, and big studio band and touring band.
Well, nothing will ever compare to what the Wrecking Crew did, and the body of records, #1 hits that they played on. No studio group will ever even come close to that. Right. The difference, and they were all incredible, absolutely incredible musicians, across the board. The difference between the Wrecking Crew and the Immediate Family or the Section is that we toured with the acts that we played with. The acts we recorded with, we went on tour with them. The Wrecking Crew tended to stay in town,
studio,
and just there was so much work, so much work for them. There's no way they could have turned it down.
Right.
So they tended. I think later on, I think that some of them toured. I know that I'm trying to think of who Hal Blaine, I think, toured with John Denver a bit.
Yes.
So I think later they did do some touring, but therein lies the difference, and we will never never do do the body of work that they did. So the Wrecking Crew stands alone. But
still, you guys' body of work is impressive nonetheless. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, you told us about the immediate family. You told us a little bit about your words of wisdom to musicians coming up today about making that choice between touring and staying home. Obviously, due to COVID, we're all home. Words of wisdom to a youngster coming up today, pandemic or not, what do you tell them? That because once you have that burning desire to do this for a living, it's hard to squelch it, right?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, my advice to young musicians, singer, songwriter, whatever, coming up now would be to find, just like Dave Grohl said, find like-minded people that play different instruments.
Right.
Form a band and play. Just play as much as you possibly can. And if you're gifted enough to be a songwriter, you really can make money in songwriting. There's two ways to make money in the music business: writers' royalties, publishing royalties, and live playing. Go out and play in a club and get a paycheck. If you're really successful like Lee Sklar and you have a YouTube channel that has hundreds of thousands of followers, you can actually make money on YouTube. So those would be my 3 recommendations.
I love it.
And the key to all of it is, if you want to be successful in this business, there's one thing that you have to be: good.
There's no way around that, brother.
You have to be good. If you're good, you got a shot. So
you got a shot.
Do whatever you got to do to be good. Not only that you think you're good, but all of your worst critics think you're good.
I like that. Even your worst critics. All right, hey, can we wrap with some rapid fire questions?
Yes.
You ready?
I'm ready.
I already know the answer to this one. Your drink of choice.
My drink of choice. Well, I have a couple.
Okay.
A really good red Cabernet Sauvignon. One thing I'm drinking currently is called Triana. It's made in the Central Coast by a company that also makes a great red wine called Austin Hope.
Nice.
So that's one. And I like a nice potato vodka martini.
That's the one that Lola told me about. All right. Which do you prefer, studio or live?
That's a tough one because I really enjoy both. I'd probably say live just because of the excitement.
Right. Instrument you wish you played.
Instrument I wish I played. Piano.
Favorite. No, better. Okay, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah, because you're a songwriter, so you have to play some, right? Guilty pleasure food.
Guilty pleasure food. Guilty pleasure food. Popcorn.
Oh, I like that. Top 3 artists that you're listening to now. Top 3 artists in your playlist.
Ray LaMontagne, Chris Stapleton, and AC/DC Essentials.
I love the variety. That's killer. Favorite city? You've been to many.
My favorite city? Vancouver.
Your friends would say you are?
Stoic.
I like that. That's what I used to describe my father. Yeah, I like that. Song or band that changed your life?
The Beatles.
Favorite decade of music?
The 60s.
Name 3 tour essentials.
3 tour essentials? Like that you take on tour with you?
Yep.
A speaker, a computer, and your own coffee.
I've never heard that one. I like that. So you're a bit of a coffee snob then?
Well, I like to have good coffee.
Yeah, there you go. Hidden talents.
Hidden talents. I don't know. I don't know if I have any hidden talents.
Maybe something that your friends don't know you're capable of.
I have some pretty good carpentry skills.
Oh,
I
see?
remodeled the house by myself, so
Really?
pretty much with the help of a couple other workers. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. You did all the plans, the schematics and everything?
No, it was just like taking off siding, putting on new siding and roof, and doing all the baseboards and the cabinetry and stuff like that, molding and everything. Yeah.
Very impressive. All
I
right.
like to work with my hands.
Okay, that explains it. So, and that segues perfect to the last question. What would you do if you weren't a career musician?
I'd probably be a painter, an artist. I was
Nice.
an art major in high school, so I would probably do something like that.
Very awesome.
Or a surf bum, I could just, travel the world surfing different waves.
So you still surf?
I do.
That's awesome. How long have you been surfing?
Oh, probably since I was about 15.
Oh, wow. So that is so cool. That's something I admire. I've tried it once and I'm embarrassed. It's so hard. It's not something you can just try once. You have to
It's
obviously.
like riding a bike. If you do it early enough, you as you get older, there's a little more preparation that goes into it. I don't surf as much in the winter as I do in the summer because the water's colder, but
Right.
I do love it.
Do you put on a wetsuit or dry suit?
Wetsuit for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I live in San Clemente, so it's nice. I live down here just south of Huntington Beach, and we have great waves, and so there's lots of opportunities. Except for when COVID happened, everybody it's like everyone got a memo that everyone's going to start surfing. Because it's kind of it's something you could do outdoors, and you're kind of by yourself. It's like golf, which I like to play golf as well. But all the surfboard manufacturers, everyone they had no surfboards to sell. Everyone bought them.
Wow.
So all the breaks got super crowded.
Mm.
So it's kind of like I haven't surfed as much this year as I normally would, just because there's too many people in the water.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's not worth it. Not worth chancing it.
Yeah.
Wow. Russell Kunkel, I am so grateful. Thank you so much, my friend.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for wanting to have me.